I never liked the way the new faucet clicks when it's shut off. Too sharp. Frank installed the old one before his hands started shaking, worn brass, just slightly loose with a sigh instead of a snap. I still reach for it sometimes. My phone buzzed across the kitchen counter once, then again. I waited until the third vibration to pick it up. The screen lit up with Haley's name. "Oh, we had it yesterday. It was just something small with David's family. You know how he is with crowds." There was a shadow on the countertop, just the blinds catching morning sun in stripes across the granite. But for a second, it looked like someone had placed something down beside me. A presence, even if I was alone. I didn't respond. I don't know what I could have written that wouldn't have sounded either petty or pathetic. I tapped the phone screen once to dim it and set it face down beside the coffee mug. The one with a chip on the rim, Haley had given it to me 5 Christmases ago, back when she still signed cards with "Love You, Mom." The silence wasn't new, but this was the first time it had a timestamp. In the living room, a thin layer of dust coated Frank's reading glasses where they sat on the armrest. I hadn't moved them. Not because of grief, not anymore. More because habits like mold grow in quiet and don't ask permission to stay. The envelope had arrived 2 days earlier, white creased and heavy. Inside, the credit card statement spread across the table like a slow unrolling of decisions made without me. $24,812. Venues, florists, catering deposits, custom calligraphy. All charged to the card I added her to back when she was in graduate school, and I said, "For emergencies only." I traced one of the charges with my finger. Blossom and Vine Studio, $1,870,000. I could picture it: pale pink arrangements, maybe peonies, maybe roses. Haley never liked carnations. "Too filler," she once said, flipping through a bridal magazine on my couch with her feet tucked under her. I want everything to feel intentional. Intentional. I opened the fridge, took out the orange juice, closed it again without pouring any. I wasn't thirsty. In the hallway, Troy's sneakers were kicked off sideways by the front door. One shoelace knotted the other, chewed at the tip. Autumn's scarf, the gauzy kind with embroidered moons, hung off the coat rack like a flag from another country I hadn't asked to visit. I walked back to the kitchen. The email still sat in my inbox unopened. The one titled "Final Guest List Review." I had seen the preview text, "Please confirm all family members by Friday to avoid confusion." That had come 2 weeks ago. I never clicked it. Not because I forgot. Because I already knew. Last month, when I asked Haley if she wanted help with seating plans, she laughed. "Oh, Mom, don't stress. You'll be at the family table, obviously. Just let me handle the logistics. David's mom's already on top of it." I had believed her. Or maybe I wanted to believe there was still a corner of the story with my name printed on it. The tin of peppermint tea rattled when I pulled it from the cupboard. 1 tea bag left. I stared at it. Fingers paused in midair. The expiration date had rubbed off. It didn't matter. The mail slot clinked. I heard the soft shuffle of envelopes on the floor, but didn't move to get them. The house had gotten good at collecting things I no longer wanted to open. Frank once told me during one of those long car rides to nowhere, we used to take that the worst kind of silence is the kind people pretend is polite. My phone buzzed again. A follow-up. "Sorry I didn't mention it. It was super last minute. Just keeping things simple. Hope that's okay." I imagined the room, the soft lighting, the clinking of wine glasses, her dress, maybe the green one she wore to her graduation dinner. David's parents seated comfortably, cake already sliced, toasts already made, maybe even a slideshow, one of those background videos with childhood photos fading into each other, and me. Somewhere in the background of her memory edited out. The tea bag broke as I lifted it from the tin leaves, scattering on the countertop like ash. I swept them into the sink with my palm. There had been no mistake. No forgotten invitation, just a deliberate reshuffling. She had rearranged the chairs and left mine in the hallway. The rustle of paper reminded me the statement was still open on the table. I folded it slowly, smoothing the creases, as if care could somehow soften truth, tucked it back into the envelope, and sealed it with the tip of my thumb. The paper cut across the edge, a small sting, barely noticeable. Frank used to say my hands looked too soft to do hard things. He was wrong about that. I wiped the countertop clean. No tea, no dust, no trace. When I reached for the chipped mug again, I turned it so the flaw faced away. The chair at the kitchen table felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the draft from the window, maybe not. I sat anyway, both feet flat on the floor, hands resting palm down. No twitch, no sound. If Haley called again, I wasn't sure I'd pick up. Not out of spite. Just because the line between being needed and being used had started to make itself known even in silence. The fridge hummed. A car passed on the street. Somewhere upstairs, Autumn's phone chimed with a notification I didn't want to decipher. I stayed still. There was no knock at the door, no apology waiting in a mailbox. Just the echo of a message that answered a question I hadn't yet asked. There had been a party, and I hadn't been missing. I had been unnecessary. I turned my phone face down again and let it rest. There was no seat left at the table. Not for the woman who paid for the plates. I never once said the word stay. Not when Frank died, not when they packed up their bags, not when the hallway grew quieter than it ever should have. Troy came back the first winter after the funeral. He called while I was bagging leaves. His voice cracked, but not in the places that showed regret. I told him yes before he finished the sentence. The guest room still had his old dresser, the one missing the middle drawer. I washed the sheets twice. He didn't bring much. A duffel bag, a bottle of vitamins he never opened, and a chipped mug from his college days. He left his rent unpaid at the apartment he'd shared with Carla. She called once to tell me. I pretended I hadn't heard the phone. Haley's car broke down the following spring. She'd just accepted a teaching position 3 hours away. When she called, I was standing in the produce aisle holding a bruised avocado. I transferred the money that afternoon. She texted a heart emoji. I saved the receipt from the dealership and never brought it up again. Later that year, Troy brought Autumn for dinner. He didn't ask if he could. She walked in wearing sandals in October and placed her sage sticks next to the salt without blinking. I made chicken pot pie. She peeled the crust off with her fork and whispered something about gluten. After dessert, she called the house cozy in a vintage sort of way. By the third week, she had taken over the sunroom. Yoga mat, always unrolled candles left half melted on the window ledge. The smell of patchouli hung on the curtains for days. I sneezed through dinner twice. Troy looked up and said, "You've always been overly sensitive to things, haven't you?" The first time I heard that tone, I thought he was teasing. The second time, I folded the napkin in my lap and didn't finish my meal. Haley brought the kids over for me to watch the weekend before Lucy's graduation. I made waffles with strawberries, even though Emmett only eats blueberries. We played Monopoly for hours. When they left, Haley kissed my cheek, her eyes already on the rearview mirror. The next morning, I saw the photos on Carla's page. The ceremony. The stage. The family picture under the banner that read Class of 2021. My name wasn't tagged. My face wasn't there. I closed the browser, folded the dish towel, and called no one. The picture frame on the mantel held our last family Christmas. Haley was still wearing braces, and Troy hadn't grown into his shoulders. Frank stood behind me with his hand just touching the small of my back. I looked at that photo the day I found Autumn reorganizing the spice rack. She held up the jar of cumin like it offended her. "Everything's out of order. Do you even use most of this?" I blinked. That belonged to your father." She shrugged and kept moving jars. I let her. The mail came late that day. Just circulars and an envelope from the utility company. I filed it under the sink. I refilled the soap dispenser and wiped down the faucet. Frank always liked it polished. Haley once asked me if I ever felt lonely in this house. I told her I liked the quiet. She nodded and replied, "You've always been the background type. You don't need much." That word background slipped into my ear and stayed. I started seeing it in the way Troy spoke over me at dinner, in the way Autumn turned the volume up on her phone during my TV shows, in the way Haley referred to me when I was sitting 2 feet away. She can help with that. She's always been the organized one. She won't mind. I kept saying yes to the borrowed car, to the extra groceries, to the missing candles, to the late-night pickups, to the rewired schedules and the rearranged shelves. Every yes was supposed to keep me necessary. Every nod a currency for belonging. Frank once told me I smoothed things too quickly, that I erased conflict before it had a chance to define itself. I laughed then. I thought he meant it as a compliment. Autumn once left incense burning in the hallway, and the smoke curled under the bedroom door. My eyes watered. I opened a window and said nothing. When the radiator made its usual banging sound at midnight, Troy knocked on my door and asked if I could get it fixed soon. It's hard for Autumn to meditate with all that clanking. I nodded. The day Haley asked me to babysit during her anniversary trip, I cleared my schedule, bought new coloring books, and baked banana bread. She sent a voice message afterward. "Thanks, you really came through. David's parents usually help, but they had plans. I kept the banana bread recipe on the fridge. It had smudges on the corner where the ink faded. No one ever asked what I wanted. I never offered it. That felt easier, cleaner, quieter. I thought if I kept everything running, the machine would see me as vital, even when I stopped being invited to the maintenance meetings." Frank's coat still hangs in the hall closet. The left pocket has a torn seam. He used to keep a peppermint tucked in there for me. I reached in last month out of habit. Just lint now. I stood in the doorway to the den and stared at the empty recliner. There was a coffee ring on the side table that I hadn't wiped up. The stain formed a perfect circle, like a small halo, left behind by something warm that used to stay longer. I never asked to be honored. I just didn't want to be erased. They didn't slam the door. They just stopped looking back. I adjusted the throw blanket on the recliner, smoothing the corners. I wasn't resisting. I was hoping. Sometimes the silence isn't what's missing. It's what stays long after the sound is gone. There was a card on the mantel last March. Pale blue with embossed flowers, a gold ribbon across the bottom. The kind sold in grocery stores near the checkout line. Inside, the handwriting was rushed round letters, like they'd been written while standing. Just 4 words: love us. Hope it's lovely. No names, no mention of 64, no memory attached. I tucked it behind the framed photo of Frank at the lake, the one where his hat flew off just as I clicked the shutter. The card stayed there for 2 weeks before I recycled it with the rest of the grocery flyers. The corner had curled from the heat of the fireplace. At Haley's cookout last summer, I arrived 10 minutes early with a peach cobbler. No one greeted me at the door. I let myself in and stood near the kitchen island, holding the foil-covered dish, watching a group of women I didn't recognize chat by the sink. One of them smiled politely and tilted her head. "Are you the sitter?" "The kids were just asking when you'd get here." I didn't correct her. I set the cobbler on the counter, took a paper plate and ate in the yard with the dog lying under my chair. No one noticed when I left early. The plate still had crumbs when I threw it out. Troy once gave a speech at a networking dinner. I watched it online, a grainy video Haley forwarded months later. He stood behind a podium in a gray suit I didn't recognize, voice steadier than I'd expected. My success is thanks to years of hard work, persistence, and the support of great mentors and friends. The room clapped. He nodded. No mention of the $5,000 check I wrote him 6 years ago to cover the rent on the first studio space. No mention of the boxes I helped pack, or the days I drove across town delivering client orders when his car was in the shop. He thanked Carla's father for believing in him. That part made the video freeze in my chest. Autumn once ran her fingers along the books on my shelf, stopping at a yellowing copy of Little Women. This isn't really your house anymore, right? She didn't say it like a question. More like she was confirming a change she'd already accepted. I nodded, not because she was right, but because arguing would have made the space smaller. The guest towels had started to smell like eucalyptus. The laundry basket held tank tops that weren't mine. The hall mirror had a smudge in the shape of someone else's palm. There was a dish in the sink once, one I didn't use. I washed it anyway. At a PTA auction years ago, a parent had stood up during my reading workshop presentation and clapped, just once. Awkward too soon. But it had startled the others into joining in. Haley had sat in the back, arms folded. She always makes it about herself, she'd said in the car on the way home. Frank reached over and placed his hand on my knee, didn't speak, just looked at me through the rear view. That quiet weight was steadier than applause. When I started packing up his clothes after the funeral, I found his watch box on the top shelf. Inside, tucked under the felt, was a note in his handwriting, for Norma in case I forget to say it. Nothing else. I folded the paper back into the lid. I never wore the watch. I kept it beside my earrings in the drawer I don't open often. The kids never asked where his things went. There's a coffee mug Haley painted in high school art class, One Mom, in shaky blue glaze across the front. It used to sit on my desk at school, filled with red pens and sunflower seeds. When I retired, I brought it home and put it near the phone. It's empty now. The letters have faded to a ghost of what they were. Last Thanksgiving, I spent the morning making sweet potatoes with marshmallows. I called Haley to check the timing. Her voice came through the line flat. David's parents are doing something. It's just easier if we all go there this year, less driving. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I covered the dish with foil and let it cool on the counter. Gave it to the neighbor later that night. They didn't ask where I'd planned to bring it. There's a notepad in my drawer with grocery lists from 3 months ago. Haley's handwriting on one of them, a reminder scribbled in the margin. Please get oat milk. We're out. No, please, Mom. No smiley face like she used to draw in high school. I still bought it. Once during a parent-teacher conference, a mother turned to me and said, "You must be very patient. Your children are lucky." I'd smiled. Not because I agreed, but because reflex doesn't ask for truth. The Sunday after Troy launched his new website, he passed me his phone at breakfast. Looks good, doesn't it? I scrolled through it. Polished, clean layout. Testimonials from clients. A photo of him shaking hands with someone in a suit. At the bottom, a quote. Success comes from those who believe in you. No mention of where that belief started. I nodded and handed the phone back. He didn't notice the coffee stain spreading on the edge of the table. Neither did I until later. I checked the back of the hallway closet last week. My coat still hung there, the green one with the missing button sleeves fraying at the cuffs. It still smelled faintly of cedar and dry air. I used to wear it to all their games, their rehearsals, their college visits. No one's mentioned it in years. The upstairs hallway has a nail that used to hold a framed photo of Haley's third-grade recital. I took it down 2 months ago. The wall has a faint square now, a pale reminder where light never touched. I get birthday texts now, usually just one line, sometimes a GIF, occasionally a heart. Hope your day is good. I read them. I never reply too quickly. I scrolled through one last week. It read, "You're the best. Thank you for everything." No name, no specifics, no anchor. They don't mean harm. I know that. They just stopped remembering the parts of me that didn't serve a purpose. It wasn't that they didn't love me. They just loved what I could give. I used to think that patience was a form of love. Now I wonder if it's just a way of staying invisible. The peppermint oil left streaks on the microwave door. Autumn said it helped with clarity. She'd turned the kitchen into her spa that morning, draping towels over the chairs and boiling citrus peels in a pot I'd once used for soup. "You don't mind, do you?" "This air is kind of depressing." Troy had taken my car again. It wasn't the first time. He left a post-it on the fridge. "Need it for a few errands. Back later." The fuel light had been on when I last drove it. I didn't mention it. And I just walked to the post office with the envelope tucked into my coat pocket and came back with a blister forming along my heel. Haley never replied to the message I sent the week she got promoted. I'd written something simple. Just 4 words and a balloon emoji. The kind of message you send when you know your congratulations will go unread. I saw the word "read" appear below it. No dots, no follow-up. Just the silence of someone who had opened the door but never waved back. I didn't say anything. Not then. The drawer in the hallway caught on something when I opened it. A sliver of paper wedged in the back. White envelope torn along the edge. My name printed in machine font. I unfolded the report, slowly smoothing it against the dining table with the side of my hand. The numbers lined up like marching orders. $1, $850. Wedding florist deposit. $4, $200. Venue reservation. $8,000. Catering installment. $6, $300. Dress boutique in Charleston. $2, $450. Custom invitations. Final payment. I flipped the pages twice. The total came to just over $24,000. My name, my card, my address, not a single transaction I recognized. I called. No answer. A minute later, the phone buzzed. "Haley." Her voice came through calm, like she was folding laundry. "Well, it had to be done. The vendors were going to cancel. You've always said the card was for emergencies." I didn't respond right away. "You're the mom. It's your job to make sure your daughter's wedding isn't a disaster." I held the phone closer, as if I hadn't heard it right. My thumb pressed into the countertop beside the cordless base. There was a crack in the laminate I'd never noticed before. "I mean, you weren't using it. And honestly, if you had been paying attention, you would have seen the emails. Troy said you don't check your inbox anymore." I stood still. The receiver felt heavier than usual. "Oh, stop being dramatic. It's just money. You'll be fine. You've got the house right." The line went quiet, then a soft ping of forwarded invoice. I didn't call back. I didn't text. I didn't tell her what I'd planned to use that money for. I didn't mention the roof estimate folded under the fruit bowl or the dental appointment I'd pushed back twice. Instead, I walked to the bedroom, opened the cedar box under the window, and pulled out the old photo of Frank and me in front of the church. My dress had been simple. We held hands. He wasn't smiling in the usual way, but you could see it in his eyes. I slid the credit report beside the photo and closed the lid. Autumn knocked on my door that night, holding a mug with something steaming. She didn't come in. "You've been quiet. Everything okay?" I nodded. She didn't wait for more. Troy came home past 10. His shoes thudded against the baseboards. The sound of beer bottles clinking in a bag. "Cars outside. You'll probably want gas." I meant to stop, but forgot. I looked at him. He didn't meet my eyes. He was already halfway down the hall scrolling through his phone. No one asked about dinner. No one asked if I needed anything. I sat down in the den and stared at the pale square on the wall where the clock used to hang. I had taken it down weeks ago when the ticking started skipping. I'd meant to fix it. I opened my phone, found the text from Haley. The message thread stretched back years, a baby photo, a question about stuffing recipes, an emoji. Then the message, "It's really not a big deal. You'll feel better tomorrow." I turned the screen face down. The couch cushion had a tear near the seam. I ran my finger along the thread and thought of the needle I'd left in the drawer near the sewing kit. The drawer where I used to keep Band-Aids and loose coins. There was nothing in it now but receipts and a single paperclip. At some point, they stopped asking, stopped checking, stopped thinking that I was something other than the house, the card, the car, the freezer that never ran empty. They didn't see me as a person. I was a system. I stood up, walked to the hall closet, and pulled down a coat I hadn't worn since before Frank passed. Inside the pocket was a crumpled receipt from a hardware store dated 5 years ago. He had written a list on the back salt bulbs drawer handles. Don't forget the smile he'd scrawled under it as a joke. It wasn't a joke anymore. I folded the receipt and placed it back inside. The coat still smelled like him. The next morning, I wrote a note on the back of the credit report and left it on the kitchen table. Just 3 words, "Please don't assume." No one mentioned it. That afternoon, the house was loud with calls, shows playing too loudly, and feet pounding upstairs. None of it touched me. They weren't cruel. That would have been easier to confront. They just believed I owed them, not love, not presents, but convenience. And I had let it happen. They didn't take advantage of me all at once. They did it in teaspoons, one charge, one request, one silence at a time. Now they'd emptied the jar, and I had been the one holding the lid open. I used to think that being needed meant being loved. It doesn't. I didn't leave the bedroom until the coffee was cold and the hallway was quiet. I listened for the familiar shuffle of slippers or the blare of the morning show. Nothing. Stillness has its own sound. I didn't call anyone. No confrontation, no raised voices, no dramatic scene in the kitchen. Just my phone in hand, numbers dialed one by one. The bank agent spoke plainly. I answered each security question with mechanical clarity. Birth date. Street I grew up on. My mother's maiden name. Yes. Remove all secondary access. Effective immediately. When the call ended, I slid the phone across the counter and stared at the stack of unopened mail. Some of it had my name, some didn't. The line between mine and theirs had been soft for a long time. Another number, another call. The credit card company this time. Yes, I'd like to report unauthorized use. No, I didn't approve the charges. Yes, I understand the process may take several weeks. No, I do not wish to press criminal charges, just recover what was taken. They called it internal fraud. I didn't argue, I just listened. Then I wrote the claim number down on the back of an old grocery list, the paper soft from time and oil stains. I tucked it into the drawer under the coffee machine where I kept rubber bands and a pair of reading glasses with one arm taped. I put on my coat next to the one with the missing button. Drove to the law office I hadn't visited since Frank passed. The parking lot was cracked, same as before. The receptionist still wore the chain with the glass pendant. She smiled, like she recognized me but didn't say it. Margaret's office hadn't changed either. Still the same muted painting of a birch tree behind her desk. She folded her hands and waited. I need to revise the will. I didn't explain why. I just handed her the folder. Inside the old copy, a printout of the bank transactions and a short note I had written in pencil on hotel stationery from a drawer I hadn't opened in years. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and reached for her pen. The new version should say this: all assets are to be divided among my children only if full reimbursement of unauthorized use is made prior to my death. That was all. No threats, no revenge. just a clause. She adjusted her glasses and typed in silence. On the way home, I stopped by Boone's locksmith. Harvey was still there, still leaned back in that same squeaky chair behind the counter. Need all the locks changed, front, back, and garage. His brow rose, but he didn't press. He just asked when I'd be home. After 2, I said. Use the side entrance. I folded the receipt and placed it in the same envelope as the claim number. That drawer was getting thicker. That afternoon, Autumn stood by the coat rack, arms crossed over her oversized sweater. Are you okay? Why are you changing the locks? I slipped the new keys into the pocket of my housecoat and looked up. Because this is my home. Not a hotel. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She watched me for a second, then walked off toward the sunroom, phone in hand. Troy came home before dinner. The door rattled before it opened, then again. I had locked the bottom bolt. He pounded twice before I opened it. You changed the locks. Are you serious? He pushed past me, stomped into the hallway like it was his. You're tearing the family apart. I looked at him. Really looked. No, I said. I'm just done letting it tear me apart. He blinked, shook his head, laughed once, short and bitter. This is about that stupid bill, isn't it? I didn't answer. You're being petty. We needed help. You had the means. What's the big deal? I turned away. The envelope on the table was already sealed. He didn't follow me. Haley didn't call. Autumn didn't come back to ask anything else. The house was full of people, but I felt nothing pushing against me anymore. No weight, no pleas, no guilt stitched into the curtains. I took out the old will that night, sat at the table under the dim lamp with the loose shade. The edges of the paper had curled slightly from humidity. Frank's signature was faint, but still legible. I ran my finger along the line, then across the bottom where mine had once followed his. The new version sat beside it. Clean. Uncreased. I didn't reread it. I didn't need to. I folded the old will once, then again. Slid it into a blank envelope from the stationery set I'd received for my 60th birthday. The kind with the soft gray trim. I didn't seal it right away. Instead, I picked up a pen and wrote one word in neat block letters across the front, obsolete. Then I sat there listening to the faint hum of the fridge. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. Just held the envelope in my hand, feeling the weight of everything that no longer applied. I didn't realize how much noise I'd adjusted to until it all stopped. The mornings were the first to change. No electric whir from a juicer. No phone alarms with chirpy chimes echoing from the guest room. The hallway rug didn't shift under hurried footsteps. Even the coffee pot seemed to drip more softly, as though it too had recalibrated to this new rhythm. I sat with my cup longer than usual, watching the swirl of cream dissolve without stirring. A line of steam curled upward and vanished into the stillness. I hadn't lit a candle. There was no competing scent in the air, no trace of eucalyptus or synthetic lavender, just the clean smell of water, boiled in a pot, too old to be shiny but too solid to throw away. The chair by the window creaked faintly when I shifted. It had been Frank's spot once, then mine briefly, then nobody's. For months it had held a laundry basket. Today it held me. I let my fingers trail along the worn piping of the armrest, tracing its curve like the edge of a memory I wasn't ready to open. A single sock lay curled near the baseboard. It wasn't mine. I didn't pick it up. I opened the drawer in the hallway and took out the envelope I hadn't yet thrown away, the one from the credit card company. Inside was the final adjustment they'd reversed, just over half the charges after the dispute, $12,500. The rest, they claimed, fell under familial consent, a term that sounded more like blame than policy. Still, I took the check and drove to the bank. The account I opened had only my name. No joint access, no shared alerts. I asked the teller for paper statements only. She hesitated, then handed me a form. "Are you sure?" she asked. "It's slower." I nodded and pressed the pen to the paper. While she processed the details, I looked down at my hands, freckled-veined, steadier than I expected. The ring I no longer wore had left a faint groove on my finger, like a shadow that didn't move. Outside, I drove home in no particular rush. The roads looked the same. The trees still leaned the same way. But the garage opened for only one car now. I walked through the house with no intention of cleaning, yet I found myself wiping fingerprints off the fridge handle. I straightened the row of tea boxes in the cupboard. I removed the photos on the hallway wall, dusted behind them, and chose not to put them all back. When I sat down for lunch, I used a plate I liked, not one that matched the set. I folded a napkin and placed it under my fork. No one noticed, of course. No one was here to ask why I'd done it. Later that day, I called Eleanor my neighbor. She used to nod at me across the fence when I watered the hydrangeas. That was the extent of it for years, nods and half smiles. "I made lasagna," I said. "Too much for one. Want to split it tonight?" A pause. "Only if I can bring salad." We didn't speak long. That was enough. In the afternoon, I drove to the town's cultural center. It was smaller than I remembered, but the notice board still stood by the door, crowded with curling flyers. Someone had pinned a child's drawing over a tax preparation ad. I signed up as a volunteer for the adult literacy group. On the form, I skipped the "Why do you want to volunteer" section. Not because I didn't have a reason, but because I couldn't translate it into 3 lines. Back home, I cleared out the drawer where the takeout menus had been stuffed. Most were outdated, some grease-stained. I left only 2, the diner and the Thai place, the ones that never judged me for ordering just one portion. A few days passed quietly. The mail came. Grocery bags were lighter. No one used up the last of the milk and put the empty carton back. The towels remained folded. The thermostat stayed where I left it. The floor in the hallway remained clear. There were no more passive sighs when I sat too long in the living room. No more closed doors after conversations that never started. I spent most mornings by the window. The sunlight moved across the room like it always had, but I noticed it now. I watched it reach the corner table, touch the vase, disappear again. An email came from Principal Meyer. I hadn't worked at the school in over 10 years. "We still remember you, Norma. You left more than a mark, you left warmth." I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either, just left it unread where I could see the bold lettering. That night I found the notebook I'd bought on a whim, a soft leather cover, unused pages thick enough to keep ink from bleeding. I hadn't written anything personal in years. Grocery lists, reminder notes, the occasional birthday card, that was all. I sat at the kitchen table, the light low, the air still. The fridge hummed once, then quiet. I uncapped the pen, touched it to the page, and waited. There was nothing urgent I needed to say. No story to recount. Just a quiet shape inside me forming its first line. I am learning to live for myself. Again. Or maybe for the first time. I closed the notebook. Not to end it, but to hold it. I used to think silence was the heaviest thing in the world. I was wrong. It's the sudden sound that follows it. The phone started ringing again. Not once, not twice. A name I hadn't seen in weeks filled the screen like a headline Haley. I didn't answer the first call, or the second, but the third came with a message. "The venue says the card declined. What's going on?" I stared at it for a while. The tone hadn't changed, only the urgency. I placed the phone face down, but it buzzed again before I even reached the sink. "Mom, Did you shut off the account? I'm getting calls from the planner. You can't just do that. I turned off the stove. I hadn't been cooking. I just didn't want to hear the ticking anymore. Later that day, Troy's voice came through with a voicemail clipped and tight. Bank says the joint card's frozen. Why, I've got things pending, Mom. You're making this really hard for everyone. There was no mention of the night he stood in the hallway saying I needed to get over it. No mention of the silent nod as I packed my things. Just irritation dressed as confusion. That night I sat in Frank's chair, not out of sentiment, just habit now. The cushion had started to reshape to me again. I balanced the phone on my knee, unread messages piling up one by one. Then one stuck. I know you're mad, but I'm your daughter. I need you. People are going to talk if my own mother won't pay for her only child's wedding. She didn't ask how I was, or where I'd been. The kettle clicked off behind me. I didn't pour the water. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I saw the car before I saw her Jennifer, Troy's ex-wife. She stood on the porch, holding Mason by the hand. The boy waved. She didn't. I opened the door and moved aside. Jennifer looked around like she was stepping into a memory she wasn't sure was real. She handed Mason a juice pouch, then turned to me. He missed you. He drew something for you. We thought maybe you'd like to see it. The drawing was folded in half. A sun in the corner. A house with crooked lines. A woman with white hair. No names, just shapes. We sat at the table. I didn't offer cookies, just tea. Jennifer kept her eyes on her cup. I didn't realize you'd changed everything. I watched the steam rise between us. Troy's worried. He says you're upset, but it's all a misunderstanding. That maybe you didn't mean to cut off the card. I reached into the drawer and placed a single envelope on the table. Not to make a point, just to make it real. I logged every charge. Grocery deliveries to an address I wasn't living at, spa packages, flights, subscription services I never used. They weren't accidents. Jennifer looked down. Her hand tightened around the cup. I didn't know it was this deep. Mason tugged on her sleeve. Grandma, you don't live here anymore? I smoothed the edge of the envelope with one finger. No, but I live better. That night, I opened the window beside my bed. The wind carried faint sounds, dogs, distant laughter, a screen door slamming 2 houses down. None of it was mine to worry about. In the morning, I found another message. You're punishing me for being overwhelmed. Not fair. And another. If you loved me, you'd help. It's just money. And then, don't ruin this. You're supposed to be the glue. I stared at that one. The wording sat wrong even as it sounded familiar. I had been the glue. For years. Invisible, sticky, expected to hold things together while being pulled apart. Expected to stretch without snapping, to bind without needing thanks. I opened my drawer and took out an old cardigan. It was faded soft at the elbows, still carrying the scent of detergent I used before Haley moved back in and replaced it with lavender sachets. I slipped it on and waited. The day passed. They didn't come. Instead, Bethany, one of Haley's friends from college, messaged me. Haley's having a hard time. She didn't mean anything bad. She's just stressed. Can't you let this go for the sake of the family? The sake of the family. I'd heard that line whispered behind doors when I stayed late at school board meetings. I'd heard it when Frank's parents insisted we host Christmas, even when my mother was in the hospital. I'd heard it when Troy refused to cancel dinner despite the storm. It always meant do the thing no one else wants to do and pretend you chose it. I didn't respond. I deleted the message, then retrieved it from the trash folder and archived it instead. I received nothing the next day. Then a knock at the door around 6. I opened it slowly. No one stood there, just an envelope on the mat. no name. Inside was an RSVP card for Haley's wedding. It had my name filled in already, along with a note, "Please sit at table 1. For appearances." Appearances. I set it on the windowsill beside a small glass jar. The jar had once held seashells from a trip we never repeated. It now held old buttons. I dropped the RSVP card in. The paper curved slightly, as if shrinking into the space. The phone buzzed again that evening. I didn't check who it was. I didn't move. I stood beside the kitchen sink, looking at the faint outline of a ring on my finger, where nothing had rested in over a year. A notification blinked. "You're the one tearing the family apart." My lips parted, but I didn't speak. I touched the edge of the countertop, cool and familiar. My eyes lingered on the last message. Then I whispered, not loud enough for anyone to hear it, but myself. I was the glue. Until they used me to patch holes I didn't make. I used to let the water boil past the whistle. Now I catch it just before. The kettle makes a soft click when it's ready. I pour it slow, careful, not to spill. The new teacups are pale jade thin, at the lip smooth as river stones. They come in a set of 2, not 6. I chose them myself. No one told me which color would look best for guests I no longer entertain. I roll out the mat in the backyard. Eleanor arrives early, always in worn sneakers and a bandana she ties like a scout. We stretch in silence. My knees don't bend the way hers do, but my breath lands where it needs to. We don't talk much. Only once, when I struggled to balance, she steadied me with one hand and said, "This is what morning should feel like." After class at the community center, I helped 2 women read the newspaper. One of them Rosa bakes shortbread and wraps it in wax paper printed with tiny strawberries. She presses it into my hand like a secret. I don't say no. I take it and tuck it in my bag, beside a folded flyer for beginner Spanish. You make learning feel safe. She doesn't know how long I practice speaking without volume. When I get home, I change the sheets. The floral pattern I used to keep the one Troy said reminded him of his childhood is gone. I replaced it with crisp cream cotton. No ruffles, no sentiment. Just fabric that folds smooth. I open the window. Let the light fall across the bed like a sheet I haven't tucked in yet. The photograph above the dresser is gone. I didn't throw it away. I wrapped it in linen, tied it with twine, and placed it inside the cedar chest with the broken latch. The one Frank built before he started forgetting things like birthdays and directions home. I don't open it often. That feels like enough. In the mirror, my hair is shorter now, easier to wash. I run a hand through it and don't flinch when I see how much gray there is. It doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like stopping the fight that no one noticed but me. The knock comes just past 3. I leave the door open long enough for her to step inside, but not long enough for wind to follow. She smells like hairspray and someone else's perfume. Her heels click against the tile, as if she doesn't remember this floor used to be hers. I didn't know who else to come to, she says, already sitting. I wait. He called it off. David said he can't marry someone who steals from her own mother. I tilt my head slightly. Not enough to show pity. Just enough to hear her without speaking. I didn't think it mattered. I mean, you weren't even using the money. The word using sits like oil in my throat. He said it makes him question everything. My values, my family. She wipes her eyes, quick and practiced. I need you to fix this. I lean forward just enough to place both palms on the table. My nails are clean. The skin along my knuckles is dry, but not cracked. I didn't ruin your wedding. She looks up surprised that my voice is still soft. You did. When you decided my silence meant consent. Her shoulders tense like she's bracing for a second slap. So that's it, she says. You just gave up on being a mom. She's louder now, Not shouting, but louder than necessary for a room this small. I meet her eyes. I don't blink. No, I stopped being your wallet. That's not the same thing. The space between us hums like a dial tone that never connects. She doesn't finish her coffee. The door clicks softly behind her. I don't follow. Later that night, I open my laptop. The light casts everything else in the room into a kind of hush. I scroll past junk mail and sale ads until I find it an email with no subject line but a sender I know. It's from Eleanor. There's a widows group in Pine Hollow. They're not as formal as the name sounds. We're going hiking next month. Want to feel the wind again? I stare at the words. I remember what wind felt like in places that weren't tied to duty at the lake before Troy was born on the cliffs, where Frank proposed in the canyon when I drove out alone that summer, before everything shifted. I type back, yes, I'm ready, but I don't send it yet. I look over at the shelf where the blue wedding vase used to be. It's empty now, not bare, just unburdened. I reread the message once more. Then I press send. And for once, no part of me waits for permission. Some papers are heavier than others, even when they weigh the same. I held the folder on my lap longer than necessary. Not because I doubted what was inside, but because the paper felt warm, as if it had already done the work for me. The office smelled faintly of lemon oil and new carpet. Margaret had replaced the blinds since the last time I was there. They no longer clattered when the wind shifted. She slid the forms across the table, and I picked up the pen that wasn't mine. The ink was black smooth and quiet. My signature went on the dotted lines beneath clean numbers and clauses 50% to the Frank Whitaker Community Scholarship, 30 to the 2 organizations where I fold pamphlets and teach adults how to read again. The final 20 sat behind a gate payable to my children, only if restitution was made. No loopholes. Margaret made sure of that. You sure you want to file this now? I nodded once. I'll hold a copy on file. The originals go out today. I didn't linger. The coffee in the lobby was lukewarm. The receptionist barely looked up. At home, I pulled the drawer with the rubber bands and batteries that didn't work. Inside, 2 cream envelopes. Thick. I placed the notarized copies inside each and added a 3rd sheet handwritten. 1 sentence. I'd rewritten it 3 times to avoid sounding cruel, but in the end, simplicity held more weight than kindness. What you do with this truth is up to you. I will no longer carry it for you. I sealed the envelopes and walked them to the mailbox. No return address, no need. Inside, I unplugged the landline. The ringer hadn't gone off in weeks, but the light still blinked with messages I didn't listen to. I placed the receiver in a canvas grocery bag with the old router and the photo magnet Haley sent one Christmas with glitter that flaked off. The bag went into the back of the closet, behind the coats I no longer wore. I changed my phone plan the next day, prepaid. Fewer numbers, fewer questions. Only the ones who mattered still had a way to reach me. The silence after that didn't feel empty, just uncluttered. On Facebook, I replaced the smiling photo of all of us in front of the fake fireplace. I chose a picture Frank had taken once in the garden, a single rose dew caught on the petal like glass. I didn't write a caption. I didn't need one. At the bookstore, I was checking the clearance shelf when I heard my name. Not Mom, not Mrs. Whitaker, just Norma. I turned. David stood near the counter, hair shorter than I remembered, sleeves rolled up, holding a receipt like it might say something else. He stepped closer, eyes steady. Thank you. I see her clearly now. He reached into his coat and handed me a check. Folded once, no envelope. $12,300. For my part, not for her. I didn't count the zeros. I looked at his handwriting. Small, neat, deliberate. Thank you. This closes the file. He didn't try to explain. That was the clearest part. That night I sat on the porch. The light had gone soft. The new doorknob gleamed beside me, the brass smooth, untouched by too many hands. I pressed my fingers to the lock and turned it slowly. No creak. No resistance. Inside the house, nothing moved. No drawer left half open. No blender cord across the counter. No perfume clinging to pillows. No one sighing from the other room when the floorboards groaned. Just the quiet shape of my own outline finally allowed to sit where it pleased. And I thought, the final lock turned and nothing inside begged to stay. I don't need to be invited anymore. I'm living, and I chose my seat. I never liked how silence had always been framed as emptiness, as if nothing meant lack. I've come to learn that silence is often just space that no longer needs defending. The coffee this morning was a little too strong. I didn't mind. I made it the way I remembered Frank liked it, 2 scoops. No sugar dark as cedar. But now I drink it alone in the blue cup I bought last month, the one with the tiny crack near the handle. I like things that have lasted long enough to crack. I took a small cookie from the tin on the counter. Oatmeal raisins still wrapped in wax paper. One of the women from the adult reading class gave it to me. "You've got a patient," way she told me last week, folding her hands like she was afraid I'd disappear. That cookie wasn't meant to impress anyone. It was simply offered. That's what made it feel like a gift. I sat down at the table and didn't check my phone. I knew what I'd find if I did messages left unread, a few recent ones still blinking. The last voicemail from Haley was shorter than the rest. "David's gone. He left last week. I'm staying with Claire now. I hope you're happy." No name. No punctuation. Just a wound thrown into the air, waiting to find something sharp enough to land on. I didn't respond. I wrote one email a month ago. It was simple. "You still have time to rebuild, so do I." That was all I had left to say. Troy, for his part, had sent a message 3 days ago. It came around midnight when the house was quiet, and even the refrigerator had stopped humming. "You were right to do what you did. I just wish you'd done it differently." I read it twice. There was nothing to say to that. Right wasn't enough, and differently wasn't mine to carry. I didn't delete the message. I just let it stay unread. I think I wanted it to sit with the weight it deserved. I folded a dish towel, slowly pressing the corners flat. I do that more now. Small things done deliberately. Folding. Watering. Stirring. Eleanor knocked softly on the back door, same as always. She never walks in. She waits. That's something I've come to cherish. She brought a jar of blueberry preserves. "I used less sugar this time," she said, placing it gently beside my mug. We didn't speak much after that. Just sat outside on the patio, watching the roses sway. I'd trimmed them last week, and they were blooming in soft reds, the kind Frank used to say reminded him of old velvet. We didn't talk about my children. We never do. We talked about the reading group, about a woman named Cassie, who finally read an entire page without stumbling. We talked about how the clouds today looked like torn cotton and how the air smelled faintly of lemon balm from the garden. Sometimes it's the people who say the least who leave the most space for you to feel like yourself. Later, I packed a small canvas bag. I was headed to the picnic the widows group had invited me to join. Eleanor had slipped the flyer under my door weeks ago. I wasn't sure at the time, but I'd kept it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pear. There was no pressure in the invite, just a line in cursive at the bottom that said, "Let the wind touch your hair again." That was enough. As I zipped the bag, I noticed the corner of a postcard sticking out of the drawer. Ray had sent it a student from the reading program. It had a picture of a lighthouse and a single sentence beneath his handwriting. "I read to my grandson today. He laughed. I owe you for that." I held the postcard for a long time, then tucked it into my wallet. Not because I needed proof, just because it reminded me that what I gave still lived somewhere where it was wanted. Before I left, I opened the bottom drawer of the hutch near the window. I pulled out 2 documents. One was my updated will. The pages were neatly stapled my signature just above the notary's stamp. My handwriting looked firm. Not perfect, but steady. The other was a receipt from the community bank showing the transfer made to the Frank Whitaker Scholarship Fund. Half of what I had now given to futures I'd never meet. I looked at them both. Not with pride, not with grief, just with clarity. Then I placed them back inside the drawer, turned the key, and let it be. No one needed to thank me. That wasn't why I did it. Outside, the wind picked up slightly. The old chimes by the porch clinked in uneven rhythm. I didn't move to silence them. I let them ring. I poured the last of the coffee into my travel mug, the one with the dent near the base. I liked that it wasn't new. I liked that it had held heat for me on mornings when nothing else did. I didn't leave a note on the counter. No instructions, no explanations. Just the blue cup in the sink, a clean dish towel folded beside it. Before stepping outside, I glanced at the door handle, brass polished, replaced after everything. The lock clicked softly as I pulled it shut. There was no one left inside to wonder where I'd gone. There didn't need to be.